The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to the Arise to Success show, where we aim to highlight inspiring individuals and their journeys to success. I'm your host in this show. My name is Gehad. Throughout the show, dear listeners, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send them on 07779 481822. So coming to introduce my guest today, our guest is Brother Amir Suleman, who is a regional radio presenter for BBC Local Radio for the past 5 years. He's also head of sales for the UK for a large multinational consultancy business. He teaches public speaking and presenter training, as well as media training, and he also hosts events. Brother Amir never planned to be a radio presenter. He volunteered at a community station and realized he had quite the knack for it. Brother Amir self-developed his skills and got comfortable being outside his comfort zone. This led to success in getting work at the BBC. Brother Amir, pleasure to have you with us today, and welcome to the Arise to Success show. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, I'm very well, thank you, sister. Assalamu alaikum to you, and thank you for inviting me on your show.
Jazakallah khair for accepting the invite and for being with us. Firstly, inshallah, if we can start with, if you can tell us more about your journey to start with in volunteering at a community station.
Yeah, I have to cast my mind back because it was quite a long time ago now, but yes, subhanAllah, this was in June of 2016. A group of people in Peterborough who were from one of the local mosques in Peterborough, only have 5 here, main mosques, and they had applied to Ofcom. They had this idea of starting a community station predominantly for the Muslim community. Mm-hmm. And nothing like this existed before. And I was already volunteering at the masjid, and they liked what I was doing. And they said, look, we've got this project, which we've just submitted an application to Ofcom. Would you like to be part of the project? I said, I'd love to. So I joined the team, and alhamdulillah, within about 4 months of joining that team, Ofcom had granted us a license, an FM license for a community radio station. So then the hard work began, where we had to then start planning towards a launch for June of the following year. So June of 2016, Ramadan actually was the target to launch the radio station. Very humble beginnings, a very small studio, and since then we've moved, but that's another story. So obviously, when you have a community radio station, you need people to come forward and present shows. And that wasn't easy. It was, we put the call out to the community. This is your radio station. It's a community station. It's a platform for you. Would you like to present shows? And not many people were coming forward back then. It was a new concept. So then we had to look at ourselves as directors and volunteers of the station. And we thought, well, we need to put our money where our mouth is, and we need to present shows ourselves to kind of lead by example. So that's where it all began for me. June 2016 was the first time I ever put a fader up on a desk presenting a show. I remember it was a Saturday morning show about 10 o'clock, and it was just about my time in the Middle East, my experiences there, because I lived there for about 6 years. And I just remember, sister, getting that bug. The first 10 minutes was nerve-wracking. Then I became not very comfortable, but more comfortable in talking on air, on radio. And I really enjoyed it. And when it had finished, it just flew by that hour. And I thought, when is the next one? When can I do this again? I was just hooked. So, alhamdulillah, it went really well. So that's exactly how it began for me. As you said in your introduction, that's not something that I planned to do. It was never an ambition of mine. It was never an aspiration to be a radio presenter. Alhamdulillah, it just happened. And I kind of recognized that I had some fairly basic fundamental skills that I could develop and hopefully be a better presenter. That's where it all began.
MashaAllah, that's amazing. And it kind of reminds me when I first started as well. But for me, it was a few months ago. But I'm wondering, when you started and you didn't have an experience, but you decided to go for it, how did it feel at the start?
Yeah, well, it was nerve-wracking. You know this.
Yeah.
When you first do it, it's extremely nerve-wracking, and you think, well, what am I going to say? Will I run out of things to say? Will I be able to fill an hour, or albeit 52 minutes because of commercial breaks? But is it, have I got enough to fill the show? So all sorts of things start going through your head, and you make dua hoping that it will go well, of course, but. You have to tie your camel. You have to tie your camel and do the right preparation. And then with the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, we will be successful. So I did a lot of preparation work just to make sure that I was covering all the angles and I could do the best I thought I could do. That's all we can do, is try our best. And, there were times when I made mistakes. I still make mistakes now. And it's like, it's live radio. I might make mistakes on your show, forgive me. But it's exciting that the fact that, we're live now on a radio station, that excites me. There's something special and magical about doing live radio, because you're exposed, you are out there, what you're saying is happening real time, and there's something just very exciting about that. And especially when you're talking to guests, you have to control what's going on, or at least try. And I find that very enjoyable. I don't find it stressful anymore. I just find it enjoyable. But going back to your question, at the beginning it was stressful, at the beginning it was nerve-wracking, at the beginning it was imposter syndrome happened a lot in the early days for me, where should I be here? Surely there's better people that can do this. That happened a lot in the first few years, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely, at the start, and we get worried. I mean, for me, it's like, oh my God, as you said about the mistakes and so on. But then when we make mistakes, we learn from them, we improve, and we get better and better. And certainly, as you said at the start, we have a lot of preparation, and as you said, inshallah, making dua and trying our best. But then it starts to get easier and easier, and that's with anything. For our dear listeners who are listening as well, that's for anything. When we first start, it could be difficult, but the more we gain experience and the more we keep doing it, it gets easier and easier. So sometimes, going for something that we're not experienced in. For me, long time ago, I would not go for it. I would like, no. I need to make sure I gain the experience first, and so on and so on. But then I started to learn, actually, no, because that is the way to get the experience. So that's for our dear listeners as well. If you are given an opportunity that can make you, develop yourself, it might be worth taking that opportunity and learning as you go as well. So Jazakallah khair for sharing that, Brother Amir. Now, in terms of the skills that you have developed, what skills would you say that you've had to work on, or you developed yourself, that helped you to get out of your comfort zone? And that's something that a lot of us struggle with. And as I shared just a while ago, that was a struggle for me before. I wouldn't get out of my comfort zone. Like, no, let me make sure I get enough experience first. So what would be advice, and what skills did you self-develop in that?
It's a great question. There was a time, I was like you, sister, where I didn't want to leave the comfort zone. I felt that if I stayed within that comfort zone, life is easy. There's no stresses, not really, no strains, and no pressure. But as I say, when I got that radio bug, I realised this is something I want to be better at. So, to answer your question, I kind of realized I had some, as I said, some basic skills, which is, so I've always been good at communication. So I've been in sales, as you mentioned in the intro. I've been in sales for over 25 years, and to be in sales in a management level right now requires a certain level of skills around communication. So good interpersonal skills, good rapport building, relationship building, reading a person, understanding body language, understanding how to mirror a person when you're meeting a stranger to build that rapport quickly. All these things are skills that I'd developed over 25 years, and they were good skills to transition into the world of radio, because I knew that communication is what radio is all about. So I had a good bedrock, but I knew that I needed to work on my skills to be a presenter, somebody who presents a show, not just somebody who can speak well and be on the radio, but somebody who can actually present and connect with a listener, and get a listener to call into the show, to interact with the show, to feel connected to however they're listening, through the internet, through a smart speaker, or just through a normal radio. So these are things that I wanted to develop, and I was recommended to read a book, which to me is the greatest book if you want to get into radio and learn how to do it. It's by a gentleman called David Lloyd, who I find very inspirational. And the book's called How to Make Great Radio. I'm holding it up now for those that can see it. It's just a great book to dip into now and then, because, it's not, for me, radio is not about learning the skill and then that's it, you're at the pinnacle. You're constantly developing, you constantly self-analyze. What I do is I like to listen back, not to every show, but I dip into some of my shows and think, okay, I could have done that slightly better. So I'm constantly trying to self-develop, even today. And this book is just, for anyone listening who might be interested in getting into radio through Inspire FM, maybe approach Inspire FM. Mashallah, a great team there. And I'm sure they can talk to you about potentially giving you a slot on the radio, depending on your idea. That's how we work in Peterborough as well. So if you are thinking about it and you like the idea, I would suggest really trying to understand about radio, the industry, the medium, how to communicate on the radio, on air. And this book, How to Make Great Radio by David Lloyd, is my strong recommendation. That helped me, sister, so much. It still does. And you develop then what I think are natural skills. It's like muscle memory in a way, but in your brain, you just remember what worked well, and you just continue to do that well, and you ditch those things that didn't work so well. Like I say, we still make mistakes. We're only human, but yeah. So it's a rather long answer, but to answer your question,
right.
That's what got me out of my comfort zone, was that self-development, was reading this book, was going on courses online, and the final thing I want to say is listening to other great radio presenters. Just listening to what they do and their style, not to copy them, because everyone's individual. You have to be yourself. If you imitate someone else, it will come across. So, but just to get inspiration that, what did they say between those two records? What did they say when they were interviewing that politician? How did they handle that difficult topic? And these are things that I learned from people who've been in the industry, 20, 30 years. So I'd recommend that as well.
Oh, that's great, mashallah. Jazakallah khair for that. So, and these are really great tips. So I'm going to summarize to 3 points, and you can tell me if I've missed anything. So it's developing the skills in whatever area. So for our dear listeners who are listening as well, so whatever area they're going to get into, if it's new to them, to develop your skills in that area, as you did with the radio, mashallah, with the radio show, you did reading the book and, courses and so on. And secondly, learning from others. And as you said, not necessarily copying them, but learning from them because they are more experienced, and then you're going to find your own way as well, but kind of learning from those who are more experienced, as well as you mentioned reflection, to reflect back on your own work. You've been watching the radio shows that you've done to see how you've done and what you could do better as well. So these are really great tips. Jazakallah khair. Did I miss anything?
No, I think you summarised it beautifully. Those are the 3 main kind of key points there. But I just elaborate on that last point that I was making about the comfort zone. And you made the point as well, which is it is so important. It's really crucial to get outside of your comfort zone. It took me, I think I was about 40 years old when I started to realise that I need to get out of this. And alhamdulillah, it served me well. And I think if we all did that, if we all had the tenacity to pursue stepping outside our comfort zone and developing ourselves, I think we'll find that we can surprise ourselves. We can begin to realise that, okay, so there's untapped potential here that we weren't capitalising on before. I think we have all got hidden skills that we just are not prepared to explore.
Absolutely. So getting out of that comfort zone helps us to see a lot about ourselves, and also help others with the skills that we have that we may not even knew that we have as strengths. And I do I don't know, because we had a presenter training with yourself before, and I can't remember if I told you about the personality work that I do. So with individuals, I kind of help them to get to know more about their strengths. And a lot of cases when I work with the individuals, I find that they tell me that our strengths have always been seen as weaknesses. For example, if a female talks a lot, right, that was seen as a weakness. She should be talking a lot, right? And as extroverts, they have a need to talk a lot. And one of the clients that I've had, she said that because she wasn't able to express herself, that led to depression. So sometimes seeing our strength as a weakness, it can hinder us. It can take us back. So sometimes getting outside our comfort zone helps us to see those strengths about ourselves, and as what happened to yourself, when you took on the opportunity to volunteer, and then mashallah, now you got to where you are and you realize that you've got a passion in that area, and you continue to develop yourself, mashallah, and you started training us as well.
Yeah, and I really enjoy that aspect of my work, is training, because I'm still loosely connected with Salam Radio in Peterborough, and we consider Inspire FM to be a sister station. They helped us a lot in the early days, but that's another story. But yeah. Training is something I do. So I do presenter training, I do public speaking training, communication skills, and media training. How to speak to the media. If you're in the management of a mosque, how to deal with press releases and approaches from the media, how to speak to them, these sorts of things. So I love to do that on a volunteer basis, just to kind of continue to give back. Because now my work is on the radio, is mainly at the BBC. So I started with them in November of 2018. So, about 2.5 years after starting at Salam Radio.
MashaAllah, that's amazing. And I'm just going to quickly remind our dear listeners that we have Brother Amir on the show today, who is a regional radio presenter for BBC Local Radio for the past 5 years. He's also head of sales for the UK for a large multinational consultancy business. He teaches public speaking and presenter training as well as media training, and he also hosts events. Dear listeners, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to send those on 07779 481822. And mashallah, Brother Amir is showing great tips here. So if you have any specific questions or anything that you would like to learn from him, please feel free to send it on the number, and I will share that inshallah with Brother Amir. So Brother Amir, as we started talking about the other roles that you're doing, could you tell us more about them, and in each of the other roles what you do? I've mentioned that you're head of sales, mashallah, for UK for large multinational consultancy business, and the public speaking and presenter training and so on. And I actually have a question for you in terms of the public speaking, because I was speaking to somebody today and she was like, I need somebody for my 5-year-old. So what age do you help when it comes to public speaking as well?
Oh, let me take that question first, actually. So in the past, it has predominantly been youth, so it's kind of 16 to 18, maybe up to 20 years old, through mosques up and down the country. And yeah, it's, the males and females. So it's predominantly aimed at the youth, just to help them build their confidence and understand that the need to communicate well in today's world is really crucial. We have people that suffer with confidence issues. We have people that even suffer with speech impediments, but that doesn't mean it needs to stop you from being a good communicator. And these are the points that I try to raise and bring to the forefront of people's minds when I do these courses. They're normally like 1-day sessions, like 6 hours, 3 hours, and then a bit of food. You have to have food, otherwise there's no point. That's a real passion of mine. It's something I really enjoy doing, because these are our next generation of community leaders. These are our next generation of radio presenters, or TV presenters. So I like to impart the little knowledge that I do have onto those that I think could benefit. So that's an answer to that question. But in terms of my other roles, I won't talk too much about my head of sales role, because it's quite a dull topic, to be honest. It pays my bills. That's why I can't leave it, because it's the job that pays my bills. I'm going to be really honest. But radio, depending on where you go, can pay well. But what I see my time at the BBC as is kind of like a side hustle. Because at the minute I'm doing 2 weekend shows. So I do a Saturday and Sunday daytime show. That's 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And that's for BBC Radio Cambridgeshire, Suffolk and Norfolk. So it goes out to 3 counties every Saturday and Sunday. And I love it. That's what gets me out of bed. The head of sales job doesn't. I have to do it. But the radio is what gets me out. In terms of other courses I've done, so we talked about the presenter training, because you kindly attended one of mine Zoom training sessions that were held in conjunction with Salam Radio and Inspire FM not so long ago. But I also do, as I say, communication skills as well. But media training is a really interesting one, because if I could just talk about that for a couple of minutes, we have many masajid up and down the country and community groups that are run by Muslims, and they are all volunteer run for the most part, and we have very, very dedicated individuals of all ages that are trying to help our brothers and sisters and children up and down the country through various initiatives. But, when it comes to getting that work out there to local newspapers, local radio, local TV, most of these organizations don't know how to construct a press release, for example, and send it to various organizations and let them know the good work that's being done. We don't sing about it. We don't shout about it. So that's part of that media training course I do, is encourage them and show them how to get your message out there, how to tell them what you're doing, not for praise, but just to help build that brilliant picture of the amazing work that Muslims do up and down the country. And then once that press release is out, you get approached by TV, radio, or printed press, and then how to speak to them, how to, deliver the right message. Because we know what it's like. I work in the media. We know what the media can be like. They can ask you tricky questions. They can ask you questions that are designed to maybe trip you up, particularly when they're talking to Muslim groups. So it's about handling those types of conversations in a very dignified and intelligent way. So that for me is a real passion, is imparting that knowledge, because I myself went through media training many years ago in London. So that helped me to kind of, because I used to be a spokesperson for one of the mosques in Peterborough, and I used to send out press releases, and I needed to know, well, how do I speak to the media? Because there was a time I recall where there'd been a terrorist attack. I think it might have been Tunisia, and then sadly, the local media would then call the mosques and want to talk to us about the terrorist attack in Tunisia. You know what they were like. So sadly, it still goes on today. Certain news outlets where they want you to condemn the terrorists, and they want you to, and I had condemnation fatigue. It had nothing to do with me. Why do I need to condemn the terrorists? So it was about training others to understand how you can deal with that effectively and intelligently, diplomatically and politely. Speak to a news organization and tell them that that's nothing to do with us. That's not Islam. We are peace-loving people, and Islam means peace, and we want unity. So yeah, I digressed a little bit. I just wanted to get that message across. It's really important that these organizations should know how to speak to the media.
Yes, no, thank you for that. I really agree on that. So Jazakallah khair for sharing this, because I do notice this when the media interviews Muslims and the kind of questions, and they insist on those questions, and some people do get stuck, and it is difficult if they don't have the training. So I found that really, really useful. So Jazakallah khair for sharing this. If people want to know, our dear listeners, if they're listening, they want to take part in the training and know more, where can they find more information?
Yeah, I think the best thing to do would be to send me an email, and I'm happy to give my email address out on the radio. So the best one would be Amir, which is AMIR, at salamradio.co.uk. You can reach me on there if you have an organisation that you think could benefit from media training or communication skills or public speaking, anything like that. Just reach out to me and we can inshallah arrange something.
No, that's great. Jazakallah khair. Specifically now as well, what's happening and what's going on. There are a lot of interviews and a lot of things happening with Muslims, and you can see sometimes where the kind of questions are being asked in ways to get you stuck. So I think that's really, really useful. So Jazakallah khair for that. We're just a few minutes before the break. So if you can, now that we're talking about the various roles that you do, if you can actually, I had a question written down. So I'll ask that first. When you mentioned about the youth sessions that you do, I'm wondering if you do any of those online as well. You mentioned the food, which is great to have the food, but I'm just wondering if there are people outside the region, if they can have online training, if you provide that.
I have done it in the during the pandemic, so it does work. It is possible to do that. Always in person is better, of course. But yeah, I mean, look, if you have a group of people, normally I kind of look for 10 plus people. A group of 10 or more makes it worthwhile. And you want to do it online, send me that email and we can make it happen. But I am prepared to travel. Like everyone, I'm busy. Like we're all busy in our own way. But for things like this, I always make the time. It might be a few months ahead, but I can give you a date in the diary that might work for the organisation. I will travel up and down the country to carry out and facilitate these courses, because it's a passion of mine to do that.
Thanks a lot. Jazakallah khair for that. Thank you. In 1 minute, before we go for the break, mashallah, with all the different roles that you do and mashallah, amazing work that you do, how do you manage your time? Sometimes we get really busy and it becomes quite difficult. We'd love to learn from you about managing time.
I wish I could give you tips on time management, but my time management is not good, sister. It really isn't. There's so much I want to do, but I can't do it because of a lack of time. I'll give you an example. There are times when other radio presenters at BBC can't do their show due to illness or holidays, and sometimes I get the call, well, can you cover this show? And I wish I could do it, but I can't because of the day job. The head of sales job is Monday to Friday, essentially. I work from home mostly, but that takes up a lot of time. So I can't always do as much radio as I'd like. I can't always do as much teaching as I'd like on these courses. So I'd love to do more, but sadly, I just don't have the time.
Yeah, mashallah. Jazakallah khair. I'm gonna just have to quickly stop here because we're going for a short break and I'm having the countdown here. So, okay. My dear listeners, this is Inspire FM Luton on 105.1. We'll be going for a short break and inshallah we'll continue. So stay tuned.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Atif Nawaz. Listen to Inspire FM shows in your time by heading over to inspirefm.org or listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back, everyone. This is the Arise to Success show. We have Brother Amir Suleman with us on the show today, who's a regional radio presenter for BBC Local Radio for the past 5 years. He's also head of sales for the UK for a large multinational consultancy business. He teaches public speaking and presenter training as well as media training, and he also hosts events. Brother Amir never planned to be a radio presenter. He volunteered at a community station and realized he had quite a knack for it. Brother Amir self-developed his skills and got comfortable being outside his comfortable zone. This led to success in getting work at the BBC, mashallah. Our dear listeners, if you have any questions or comments, or if you would like to ask Brother Amir any questions, please feel free to send those in 07779 481822. So, Brother Amir, before the break, we were talking about what you do, and we also talked about how we can get outside our comfort zone, as well as the different trainings that you do and how it can help the Muslim youth and our Muslim brothers and sisters out there, inshallah, to be better skilled at answering questions in the media and so on. And we also talked about the various roles that you hold, and just before the break we were talking about time management, but perhaps maybe we can talk about it a little from a different angle in terms of multitasking, having so many different roles, mashallah. Sometimes, when I do that, I find that it becomes a bit of a challenge having to shift my concentration from here to there to there to there. But mashallah, as you said, the amazing thing about it is that, and what wakes you up every morning is that radio show on the weekend, although that sometimes, we want the weekend for ourselves. Doing what we're passionate about is actually what wakes up in the morning. So tell us more about that and managing, or not necessarily managing, but having multiple roles. And part of them is what you're really passionate about.
Yeah. It's another great question. Thank you, sister. So multitasking is not a great skill of mine either, to be honest. So I've told you time management is not good, could be better, but it's same for multitasking because, as you just alluded to there, we have certain passions, things we like doing more than other things, and mine is radio. So I find that a lot of my energy, a lot of my time on the day-to-day task is angled and leaning towards the radio side of things, when what I should be doing is maybe putting the balance the other way and putting it more towards my head of sales role. But thankfully, alhamdulillah, it doesn't take that much time, the head of sales role. So I find that in order to do an exceptional radio show, and you have to care about what goes out, you have to care about the output. So that's why I try to dedicate as much time as I possibly can towards those shows. To give you an example, 2 4-hour shows, so that's 8 hours of live radio every Saturday and Sunday, week in, week out. So I probably spend 8 hours on a Friday, 8 hours, broken up throughout the day in preparing that. Also with team members at BBC Radio. So there's 2 other colleagues that help put that show together. So the 3 of us, over, I'd say about 8 to 10 man hours, can then put together 8 hours of live radio, because you have to find guests, book them, make sure that the stories are engaging and entertaining and interesting, make sure there's a balance between light and shade. That's an industry term. So when we talk about light and shade, we want stories that are light and uplifting and positive, and stories that, make us think. For example, on Saturday, I had a story about baby loss. A woman that sadly had lost 5 children in her life, and her 6th child is now alive and well. So it was a very sad story, but you have to balance the show, and you have to make sure that there's content that will appeal to everyone as best as you can. So it requires a certain amount of dedication and time, thought. I'm always thinking about radio. I could be wake up in the middle of the night and I have an idea for the radio show, and I'll make a note of it. I could be on air presenting, and I'll think of something and I'll make a little note of it on the paper in front of me. So it does require time. Multitasking is something I should be better at, but because, as I said, because the love and the passion is for radio, I just find that balance is not where it should be. I give probably too much time to radio. So yeah, I think I could probably learn from someone else when it comes to multitasking.
And it's great, mashallah, that you dedicate a lot of time for things that you're passionate about, because that's important for our mental health, right, as well.
Yeah.
So I love how you actually dedicate a lot of time for the things that you like to do. And that is a message out there for those individuals, because I work as a counselor as well. And a lot of the young people I work with, when I ask them, what are your hobbies? Like, I don't have any. Even adults as well. I was in that place myself. So it's quite important that we actually find what we are passionate about, what we like. And even if we're not sure, to try different things until we find what we like, and actually invest a lot of time, doing it, because it is quite important for our mental health as well. So I actually love that. Multitasking can be difficult, but the fact that you actually dedicate a lot of time for what you're passionate about is something that is really, really great. So Jazakallah khair for sharing that. Going back a little bit to when you started off as a volunteer, so I would like to know more about that transition. How long did it take you from being or from volunteering at a community station to being a BBC radio presenter? And if you can tell us more about that journey, what are the wins? What could have, if there were any struggles, and how did you overcome those struggles as well?
Yeah, so it's actually a very fortunate situation that happened to me, alhamdulillah. So none of this was planned. I didn't apply to the BBC. It wasn't, again, an aspirational step that I was looking for, because I'd only been, doing community radio for just over 2 years, June 2016 to November 2018. And then something happened. So between those dates, June 2016 to November 2018, myself and normally a colleague who's also from Salam Radio, we would often be guests on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire to talk about events that we were doing in the community. So we'd contribute. So, they'd call us into the studio and they'd talk to us for 5 to 7, 10 minutes about the next initiative that we were doing. So I kind of got on BBC Radio's radar that way, because I was regularly a guest talking about Islam, talking about the initiatives such as Visit My Mosque Open Day. I used to run them, and I'd put press releases out, and I'd go on every year and talk about Visit My Mosque, why it's important, things like this, just an example. So then what happened in November is I got approached by somebody from BBC Radio Cambridge, a senior producer, who said that my name was given to her by somebody who was a producer on one of the radio shows on BBC Radio Cambridge that I was regularly a guest on. So she was tasked with and commissioned to put together a short series of shows about the community. And my name was given to her. She gave me a call and said, would you be interested in doing a short series of shows about the work you do in the community on BBC Radio Cambridge? I said, I'd love that. That'd be amazing. So it wasn't a live show. It was all pre-recorded, and she would come to Peterborough and we'd go in the community speaking to people that I work with at the mosque, at the radio station, other people who I know have amazing stories, including some people who, fled Afghanistan as refugees and came here in a truck, almost died on the way. And they shared their story with us at the mosque, and it was just exciting stories. So we put these 5 shows together. It was called More Than a Mosque. That was the name of the series. It's still available on BBC Sounds. You can listen to it there from November 2018. So that went really well, those 5 shows. And then that same producer, his name's Heather, she's actually from Dunstable, so your neck of the woods. And so she said, you should come and meet our editor, so the person in charge at BBC Radio Cambridgeshire, just to say hello. So I did that, and then the conversation started morphing into, would you maybe like to try presenting on BBC Radio Cambridgeshire? And that took me aback. I wasn't expecting it at all. I was flattered, but also shocked and a little bit scared, thinking that's a big step, going from a community radio station to BBC local radio. And they said, we'd start you off just covering shows when people fall ill or, go on leave, whatever. So I did that. I said, okay. And I remember my very first show was March 2019. And it was a 1-hour show. And I remember just preparing like mad for this show and just making, again, tying my camel, making sure that, I'm making du'as, tying my camel, doing the best I can, and then leaving the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it went well. That 1-hour show went really well. And, it helps on BBC local radio that you play music. That fills a lot of time as well. So you're not constantly talking. So after that show, they said, well, we think that went well. We think that was a success. So we'll call you up to do more. And it started to escalate. I then started to do a 2-hour show, a 3-hour show. Then during the pandemic, they started to do 4-hour shows, which are still the case today. They've kept that format. A 4-hour show is a long show, but it's now the norm up and down the country. And then eventually I started to develop my skills, and they noticed that I was getting better because of that, more stepping outside the comfort zone, self-development. And then they said, look, we'd love to offer you a regular slot on a Friday. So no more just cover presenting, but your own show every Friday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Would you like to do that? I said, yeah, I'd love to. So, and that ran for 3 years, alhamdulillah. So it went really well until it was until August of this year. So August 2020 to August 2023. And then they changed the schedule, and now, alhamdulillah, I have two weekend shows. So the point of telling you that story is that it just wasn't planned at all. Salam Radio wasn't planned. The BBC wasn't planned. It's just a journey that I... Not reluctantly, because I wouldn't say reluctantly, because I took my time to make that decision. I took my time to calculate the risk versus the reward of doing this. That was the same with Salam Radio. That's the same with BBC. I just thought, should I do this? What are the benefits? What are the pros and cons? I literally made a list. What's good about this? What's bad about this? And the pros outweighed the cons. So I said, yes, let's go for this, inshallah. And it's worked out well. So, yeah, that brings us to where we are today. I love presenting on BBC Local Radio because I get to speak to people from all walks of life, people of all ages, about all sorts of stories. I get to meet people that I would never meet. I get to hear stories that I would never hear if I didn't have this role. And the best part of doing radio, for me, sister, is hearing from the listener. And just hearing from... For example, an elderly person recently got in touch to say she lives alone and, I'm her only friend. She tunes in every Saturday or Sunday because she considers me a friend. Because that medium, I think I mentioned this in the training with you, that medium of radio can be a very personal connection. Yeah. And that person is listening in their home, and it's like we're talking to them and just them. And if you do radio right, that's exactly how it should feel. A very, very close connection where that person can not feel so lonely. We have amazingly talented journalism coordinators, or they might be known as broadcast assistants. Most of them are quite young, early 20s. And they're the people that answer the phones at BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. And they have to deal with all sorts of things. They have to deal with people who are... have mental health issues. They have people who are incredibly lonely. We've had people call in threatening to take their own life. So these people feel connected to the station. They want to share a lot with us. And these young people are trained to deal with those types of calls, to make sure that those people are not ignored. Those people are looked out for and pointed and signposted to get the help that they need. the point of telling you this is that don't underestimate the power of radio. It's not dead. TVs, obviously, Netflix and all these streaming services have taken over the world. But radio is definitely very much alive. And that's why we're here today.
Yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And I love the story that you've shared, subhanAllah. It could be just a very small difference that you can make to someone, but it can make a huge difference to their lives. And the story that you shared where the listener came to you and said, "You're my friend," and that was so sweet. So thank you for sharing that as well. And I can definitely relate to a lot of the things that you said about starting the radio show, where at the start a lot of preparation, then it starts to get easier and easier. And also, things that we never thought we'll do, like connecting with so many people like yourself and other, mashallah. I've had a lot of female business women and entrepreneurs on my show that I've connected with, and it's amazing, subhanAllah. So it opens, new doors, it opens new opportunities for the individual, and that's again not just for the radio show. I'm talking to our dear listeners in any fields that you can get into. You can have opportunities that can open other opportunities for yourself. So again, coming back to coming out of the comfort zone, it's something that great to take on those opportunities. And jazakallah for all that you've shared as well about the stories that with the lady who the listener who gave you feedback as well. It's always lovely to hear those feedback, isn't it?
It is. It really is. It makes it all worthwhile, sister. Now and then as a presenter, sometimes people think radio presenters are quite how can I put this? They're quite thick-skinned. That's not the case. Sometimes if a listener messages in and says, I think this section should have been a bit shorter. You went on a bit too much. I take it, not personally, but I take that criticism. It stays with me. But equally, somebody gets in touch, alhamdulillah, and they say they loved what just happened on the radio. That guest and that chat you had was brilliant. You would experience that as well. It's great. It's a little boost that we need. To almost, it's a motivational thing. I'd love to hear from the listener, and I make it easy for the listener to get in touch because I cherish them. A simple question like, what are you doing today? What are you up to? I really want to know. And it's like they feel like they're talking to them, and I genuinely want to hear from them. I want to know what they're doing. I want to know what their day's looking like as they're listening to me. What are you doing? And it starts a conversation. People call in and they just want a friendly chat. And I think that's the power of local radio. And community radio, I actually feel is even more powerful, like Inspire FM, because it does so much in bringing diverse communities together. And I think that's the real power of community radio. If done well, it can be a very, very powerful tool in breaking down barriers, misconceptions, and bringing diverse communities together. And that's something, sadly, I think we don't have enough of those types of stations doing that. We need more Inspire FMs. We need more Salam radios. That's what I think.
Jazakallah khair for the nice comments as well, and definitely I do love this interaction with the listeners, and that's I know something that I know I need to work on, and it's what I mentioned in the presenter training as well, is that I need to work on a bit more on that. I'm trying, inshallah we'll get there.
Well, sister, can I just say, mashallah, I'm not just saying this because I'm on your show, but you don't come across as someone who's been doing this such a short time. You have really, you have very good skills, if I may say, and it's very easy to talk to you, so that means you are a natural presenter, mashallah.
Alhamdulillah, and jazakallah khair for the kind words. Thank you. It's, as you said, when you have a passion in something, you put a lot of effort and work into it. So alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair for that. And I'm just going to remind our dear listeners that we have Brother Amir on the show today with us, who's a regional radio presenter for BBC Local Radio for the past 5 years. He's also head of sales for the UK for the UK. Oh, I'll mix that up. For the UK for a large multinational consultancy business, and he teaches public speaking and presenter training as well as media training, and he also hosts events. Brother Amir, I would like to move into talking a little bit more about one person who is inspiration, because with this radio show as well is that I like to bring inspiring individuals like yourself to inspire other Muslims. So I'd love to know from yourself, who's one person who's your inspiration and why. And coming back to what I mentioned earlier is that I like to engage the listeners, and I'm working on that. So let me implement that a bit more and ask our dear listeners to send us one person who's an inspiration for them and why as well. And Brother Amr, giving you the time to answer this question.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's a very difficult question for me. I mean, I'll give you an obvious answer, then I'll give you a less obvious answer, because I basically have two people. One of them, the obvious one, is my father. He sadly is no longer with us. But but he passed away in 2013. But he was he was 43 when I was born, so he was quite advanced in terms of age. But he was a businessman. You know, he had a laundrette first before I was born. Then he had a post office with a small shop. Then he had more shops that we moved around the UK a lot. And then he retired with a small village shop in Norfolk, actually. So he was a businessman. Nowadays you'd call them entrepreneurs, but he just called himself a businessman. And what I saw him do as I was growing up in my formative years was always provide for us. And money wasn't always there. Business was bad sometimes. There was a recession we went through. And you could see the stresses that my dad and my mother would go through to make sure there was food on the table, to make sure that the business survived. And when you're growing up and, you know, you always have a meal, alhamdulillah, and you feel... You don't realize it then, but then when you get older and more mature and you change the way you think, you realize just how blessed you were to have a childhood where you always had a meal, despite what was going on. So I came to realize when I was about 18 or 19 just how hard my dad had it at times in terms of trying to keep the business afloat. So he's inspirational in the sense that he persevered. He was a survivor. He relied on his ability to not give up. He was a fighter. So he's one person that really inspires me to this day. I often think about him and the chats we used to have in his later years. He'd give me advice. And you know what it's like, sister, you know, when your parent gives you advice when you're a teenager, it's in one ear, out the other. You don't listen. Yeah. You just think, okay, mum, okay, dad, I understand. But then when you get older, you realize, wow, they made sense. What they were saying was so true. And that's just natural. So he's the first person. And in stark contrast, it's someone who I've already mentioned that I've never met. It's my next inspiration. And it's the gentleman I told you about who wrote the book, David Lloyd. Yeah. Because of the passion of radio, this gentleman, he knows radio inside out. He's presented, he's produced, you know, he's been on the technical side of things. He just knows radio inside out, and it comes across in his book. I had the opportunity to meet him once at an event, and then I couldn't attend the event. So I was very gutted about not being able to make that. But he's just someone I think is the epitome of radio. Somebody who embraces it, understands it, loves it, wants anything he does with radio to be, exceptional. And he inspires me to every single time to try and do a little bit better. So I never get complacent, sister. You know, if I have a good show, and alhamdulillah, I do have good shows, but there were times when you think, okay, that show could have been better. That show I could have done something differently. But even when I have an exceptional show and I think, yeah, that was a really good one, I just think, what can I do to just maybe get it 1% better next time? So I'm always trying to excel. It doesn't always work, but the want is there, the ambition is there, and I've learned that from David Lloyd. So these are the two people I would say really inspire me. But I would like to just add something else into the mix here, and it's not about inspiration. It's about having a fundamental bedrock in place that enables me to do what I want to do, and that is my family. You know, my family support me. My family, if they were not there, I don't think I'd have the motivation to do what I want to do. It's all very much part of the bigger picture, and it's very difficult to put into words, but hopefully it's coming across that you need to make sure that you have a good bedrock at home before you can even begin to be successful outside of the home. That's what I find. I think you need peace at home. Absolutely. And it's the foundation, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. Definitely. Jazakallah khair for that. I love what you mentioned as well about, having somebody that you haven't seen as your inspiration, right? Yeah. And that kind of helps me to encourage and say that as well, is that no matter what we do, we could make a difference in someone's life that we may not even know about. Like,
the writer, right? The author doesn't
Yeah.
even know that, right? You didn't get the chance, although that you kind of signed up to or registered to go to the event, but you didn't get the chance to meet him. So subhanallah, somebody out there could see you as an inspiration. So it just kind of like it encourages us to do what we're passionate about, because when we're doing something that we're passionate about, somebody will connect with us, and we may not even know about it, but we are making that difference in someone's life. So jazakallah khair for sharing that as well. We are coming close to the end of the show, so I'd love to end with, if you can advise, what advice would you give us, our dear listeners, to follow their aspirations, their dreams, their passions?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know there's not much time left. I'll try and keep this brief. So, yeah, this is a difficult one for me, because what happened to me, as I said, on Salam Radio and at the BBC, wasn't an aspiration. It's just a journey that I accepted. It was fate which I accepted, and I saw it as a gift from Allah. I saw this as, destiny. But what I do know is that, of course, my aspiration is to be a better presenter and always do better. So the advice from that perspective is, there are easy ways to be better at what you're already doing. And that is just to self-analyze. Don't be afraid to be a little bit self-critical. Don't be afraid to ask your friends to be a critical friend. But the only way that will work is if you're able to deal with criticism and take it. Because some of us don't take criticism well at all, and we'll go back and we'll bite back saying, well, what would you do? How would you do it differently? And bite back. But just take it, absorb it, be a sponge, be humble, and use that feedback constructively to better yourself in either whatever you're doing now, or take the advice if it's something new that you're thinking of going into. Ask family, ask friends, trusted people, your trusted advisors. Do you think I should go down this road? And go from there. Yeah.
Definitely, I love that. Jazakallah khair. And I love the self-criticism, but I also would make sure to ask individuals not to overdo it, because overdoing it can be quite harmful as well. But Jazakallah khair, great tips. And thank you so much for being here with us today, and for accepting my invite, and for all that you've shared that, inshallah, has been helpful to me, and inshallah to our dear listeners as well. Dear listeners, Jazakallah khair also for being with us today, and please do stay tuned to future shows. Next week we have Muniba Amjad, who's a head girl at Shawnee Girls School, so please do join us for next week's show. Jazakallah khair, Brother Amir, and Jazakallah khair to all listeners. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Why not tune in to our live stream at inspirefm.org, and follow and subscribe to our social media platforms at Inspire FM Luton.